You didn't need it anyway, my father said, like he hadn't just emptied my entire college fund. 4 years of scholarships, part-time jobs, and late-night hustles gone. I was 25, alone in London, and suddenly broke because the man who raised me thought his gambling debts mattered more than my future. He underestimated the wrong daughter. The call came just after midnight. I was sitting at my tiny desk in a London flat I'd worked tooth and nail to afford, watching rain streak the windows. My father's voice floated through the speaker like he was reading me the weather forecast, not casually confessing to a betrayal that would derail everything I'd built. Don't worry, he added. You're smart. You'll figure it out. Figure it out? As if I had a choice. As if I hadn't spent years clawing my way toward a debt-free diploma. Tutoring teenagers, waiting tables, applying for every scholarship I could find. Every penny had gone into that account. And now it was gone just like that. Erased with a phone call. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat there, heart pounding, phone still warm in my hand, letting the silence do the grieving for me. It wasn't just the money he stole. It was the trust. The kind that takes a lifetime to build and seconds to destroy. Before hanging up, he dropped one more line. Let's keep this between us, all right? No need to worry your mother or your grandmother. Ah, there it was. The real motive, control. He didn't just take the money. He wanted to control the story. Just like when I was 12 and he borrowed the money I saved for a school trip. Just like when he convinced me to co-sign a small account at 17 and promised, hand on heart, never to touch it. He always had excuses. Always had charm. But this time he'd gone too far. I opened my laptop and began building something stronger than outrage. A case. I dug up bank statements, highlighted every scholarship deposit, listed every job I'd worked. If this was war, I was gathering ammunition. I wasn't a little girl anymore. And this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision, a deliberate one, to prioritize his self-inflicted mess over my future. People say betrayal by a stranger is bad. But betrayal by your own blood? That cuts deeper than any knife. Still, I didn't run to family. Not yet. I needed a plan, not a pity party. Quietly, methodically, I began researching legal aid, university emergency grants, even part-time jobs I could take to stay afloat. My roommate Emma walked in, eyes widening at the piles of paper around me. Vanessa, she said, you look like you're planning a murder. I didn't smile. Not really. Not murder, I said. Accountability. My father thought I'd roll over. That I'd sulk, maybe cry and move on. What he didn't realize was that the very resourcefulness he mocked, the drive, the planning, the spreadsheets, was about to become his worst nightmare. He didn't just steal my money. He woke up someone who doesn't let people get away with it. The next morning I woke up with a fire in my chest and a checklist in my head. First, gather the evidence. I printed out every transaction from the joint account my father had access to. Over $42,000, gone in less than 4 weeks. He hadn't just taken it all at once. He'd done it in increments. Small enough not to trigger automatic fraud alerts, but large enough to leave me with nothing. A seasoned thief disguised as a dad. Second, protect what remained. I logged into every account he might know about, old savings, backup credit lines, even my PayPal, and moved everything to a new bank. One with stronger privacy rules. New passwords, new questions, new firewalls. The same man who used to walk me to elementary school had just become a security threat. As I worked, my phone buzzed again. Another text from him. Don't stress too much about the money. Maybe it's a sign you should take a break from school. I know some guys who could get you a modeling gig. Better money than that degree. I stared at the screen, stunned. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even pretending. To him, this wasn't theft. It was a minor setback. An inconvenience that should push me toward something easier. Something prettier. My chest tightened, but not from sadness. From clarity. This man didn't believe in me. He never had. Every time I brought home straight A's, he'd smile and say, "Beauty and brains, huh? Well, good thing you're pretty." Like my accomplishments were just backup plans in case I didn't marry rich. But I hadn't spent 4 years building this life just to let him undo it in one night. I started making calls. Quiet ones. To my university's financial aid office, just to understand my options. To legal aid, just to ask questions. To a job board, just to see what was out there. I wasn't asking for help yet. I was doing reconnaissance. Because while he was out sipping cocktails with my tuition, I was plotting survival. Then in the middle of a study session my phone rang again. Dad. I hesitated, then answered. Hey princess. Quick question, do you happen to have any other savings accounts? Just curious. You're always so good with money. His voice was breezy, like he was asking about the weather. I bit my tongue. Why? I asked. No reason, he said. Just thinking about your future. You know how dads are. Thinking about my future. That was rich. Sorry, Dad. I'm in class. Talk later. I hung up and added another task to my list. Shut down every account he might touch. No more gaps. No more blind spots. That night, I received an email from my grandmother. Called your father today. He seemed nervous when I asked about your college fund. Is everything okay? I stared at her message and for the first time in days, felt something new: leverage. He was scared. Not because he took the money, but because now someone else might know. And I knew exactly who to tell first. I didn't waste time. I replied to my grandmother's email with one sentence. Can we talk privately? There's something you should know. We set up a video call that evening. The second her face filled the screen, I saw it. The steel in her eyes that I remembered from childhood. This wasn't a woman easily fooled, and certainly not one who tolerated injustice, especially when it involved her grandchildren. I laid it all out. The drained account. The casual confession. The text messages downplaying the damage. Her mouth tightened. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when I was done, she exhaled slowly. That man has gone too far, she said. Her voice wasn't angry, it was resolved. Within hours, she'd arranged a family meeting. No dad. Just the women. My grandmother, my mother, and Aunt Sarah. My mom's sister and conveniently a lawyer. When the call started, I shared my screen. Transaction records, texts, and his modeling job suggestion. As I walked them through everything, my mother's hands began to shake. I hadn't seen her cry since I was 10. I had no idea, she whispered. He told me you wanted to take a break from school. That you were thinking about moving home. Of course he had. He was always rewriting the story to suit him. When I studied abroad, he said I was running away from family obligations. When I got a scholarship, he claimed it was his idea to push me harder. Every success of mine became part of his personal highlight reel, until I stopped letting him narrate. I'm not letting him get away with this, I said. My aunt nodded. Good. He may be a cosigner, but that doesn't mean he's untouchable. We may not have criminal grounds, but civil options? We've got them. She leaned in. Has he ever acknowledged in writing that the money was for your education? I pulled up the text. I know it was meant for school, but things came up. Her eyebrows lifted. Perfect. In that moment, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The silence that had once protected him was cracking. The women in my family, once quiet, once resigned, were now rising. Grandma took charge. I'll speak to him first. He needs to know the family's not turning a blind eye anymore. Aunt Sarah would handle the legal side. A formal demand letter. Clear expectations. No room for manipulation. And my mother? Her voice was soft but firm. I've stayed married to a man who took more than money. He's taken trust, peace, stability. But not anymore. Later that night, my father called again. Your grandmother seemed upset today, he said cautiously. You didn't tell her anything, did you? I paused. About what, Dad? The money you stole? The future you tried to derail? Or the fact that you think my education means less than your bar tab? Silence. Don't call me princess anymore, I added. And from now on, everything goes through Aunt Sarah. Click. For the first time, he wasn't the one hanging up. My father's reaction came fast, and exactly as expected. First, denial. You're blowing this out of proportion. Then guilt. It's just money, Vanessa. Family is more important than money. And finally, desperation. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat your own father? Each message came through like a rehearsed line from an old script. One he'd used on my mother, my grandmother, probably even himself. But this time it wasn't working. I didn't respond. I just forwarded every text to Aunt Sarah. Let him dig his own hole. I wasn't throwing punches. I was documenting them. The next escalation came not through a message but a knock. He showed up at my grandmother's house, where I was staying until my flight back to London. Dressed in his usual casual way, like he was about to run errands, not confront a family he'd betrayed. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, her voice sharpened like a blade. "What do you want, Gregory?" "I just came to talk. This whole thing's gotten out of hand. You emptied your daughter's college fund," she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Have you no shame?" "Mother, please, this is a private family matter." "Exactly," she snapped. "And you betrayed your family. Now leave, before I call the police." He stood frozen for a second, then mumbled something under his breath and walked off the porch like a man who just realized the audience wasn't clapping anymore. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table, stunned by how calm she'd stayed. "He's afraid," she said, pouring herself a cup of tea. "Because for once, the story isn't his to tell." Still, the text didn't stop. "Your grandmother's turning you against me. I'm your father. You owe me respect. You're ruining my life." It was wild. He truly believed he was the victim here. That my reaction to his theft was worse than the theft itself. I used to internalize that guilt. I used to think keeping peace was part of being a good daughter. Not anymore. Aunt Sarah's demand letter arrived at his house by certified mail 3 days later. It outlined every withdrawal, attached every screenshot, and included a repayment plan with deadlines. It was professional, precise, and cold. He called in a fury. "You can't sue your own father." I answered calmly, "Watch me." Then I hung up. That call was the final spark. The fallout spread like wildfire. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me. One of my aunts admitted he'd once borrowed money from her kid's birthday savings. Another shared that he'd promised her husband a business opportunity that never happened. For the first time in decades, people stopped excusing him, stopped protecting him. The man who had relied on charm and guilt to shield himself for years was losing control. Not just over me but over the whole narrative. And I wasn't the villain in this story anymore. I was the one who finally said, "Enough." By the time my mother officially filed for divorce, the cracks in my father's carefully constructed life had split wide open. In court, he tried to wear his old costume, laid back, misunderstood, the fun dad who just made a few mistakes. But that charm doesn't hold up under oath. Especially not when the judge asked him point blank, "You emptied your daughter's college fund to pay off gambling debts?" "I was going to pay it back," he said, voice suddenly much smaller. "With what income?" the judge pressed, flipping through the records. "According to these documents, you haven't held a full-time job in over 3 years." He shrunk behind the defense table. Every attempt to explain himself only revealed more lies, more manipulation, more of the pattern we all knew but had never named out loud. His reputation started collapsing faster than we could track it. Friends who had once invested in his business ventures came forward, demanding repayment. Extended relatives called my grandmother to share their own stories. Loans never returned, promises broken, and silence purchased with guilt. My mother, who had spent 2 decades standing beside him out of loyalty, was now standing across from him in court with a folder full of bank records, emails, and receipts. Among them, proof that he'd taken out loans in her name without her knowledge, tried to remortgage their house, and used my college fund as his personal lifeline. "This isn't a marriage," she told the court. "This was theft, financial and emotional." Meanwhile, I was meeting with my university's financial aid office, this time with my aunt's letter and full documentation. I expected bureaucracy. I got compassion. "Vanessa," the counselor said, "you're not the first student we've seen put in this position. But the fact that you're still here, still fighting, that says everything." They offered me a crisis grant, helped set up a deferred tuition plan, and connected me with a part-time job on campus. I didn't take charity. I took opportunity and made it mine. Back home, my aunt discovered something else. Despite claiming he was broke, my father had recently purchased a new car and posted vacation photos from a luxury resort. A country club membership he'd somehow still maintained came to light. "He's not poor," Aunt Sarah said. "He's just good at hiding money. But not good enough." Every revelation added another nail to the coffin of the image he had worked so hard to project. And as more people came forward, that image turned into something else entirely. A warning. His texts grew frantic. You're destroying my life. This is killing me. I raised you better than this. But I didn't flinch. Because every message proved what I already knew. He didn't regret what he did. He regretted being caught. And now, for the first time, the punishment wasn't just emotional. It was financial, legal, and public. Justice didn't knock. It walked right through the front door, sat down at the dinner table, and made itself at home. I returned to London with less money, less family, and less illusion, but more clarity than I'd ever had in my life. My part-time job turned into a full-time opportunity, thanks to the recommendation of a professor who had watched me juggle crisis and coursework with quiet precision. The firm was small but global. They saw potential, not pity. For once, my future wasn't tied to someone's broken promise, but to my own performance. I moved into a new flat, modest but fully mine. I picked out the furniture, hung photos that made me smile, and brewed my own coffee in the morning without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every bill I paid, every paycheck I earned was proof. I was not a victim. I was a builder, a survivor, a woman no longer shackled to family debt, guilt, or silence. But my father, he hadn't gone quietly. His first gesture was a birthday card, his first in years. Inside was a short note. So proud of all you've accomplished. Love, Dad, your biggest supporter. The audacity. Then came the social media posts. Old family photos, captions about how he always believed in me. Claims that he had supported me through everything. It was the digital version of rewriting history, and it lit a fire in me that I thought I'd already put out. I called Aunt Sarah. Together, we drafted a cease and desist letter. No more false narratives. No more pretending to be the father he never was. Not on my name. Not on my success. But he didn't stop there. Family friends began reaching out, saying he'd offered to connect their kids with internships at my firm. For a small consulting fee, of course. One woman emailed me directly. Your father says you're hiring and that he can put in a good word. Is that true? I wrote back kindly but firmly. My father has no affiliation with my company. He is not authorized to represent me or our hiring process in any way. Every one of those messages became another brick in the wall between his lies and my truth. When my grandmother visited London for the first time in her life, she stepped into my flat, looked around and smiled. You've built a life here, she said. Not just a job. A life. That night over dinner, I showed her one of his latest texts. Heard your mom's visiting. Flat must be tight. I know some nice hotels want me to help. We laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Same tactics. Same attempts at leverage. But they didn't work anymore. Should I respond? I asked. She raised her glass. You already have. Look around you. Your success is the answer. For once, I didn't need revenge. Because the most powerful thing you can give someone who tried to take everything from you is your absence. 2 years after the night my father stole my future, I received a quiet notification on my phone. Final payment received. That was it. The last court-ordered installment. No message attached.
No επάλεγη.
Just a digital receipt, closing a chapter he thought would tie me to him forever. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the screen for a moment, letting the stillness settle in my chest. It was over. Not the whole story of my life, but the part where I kept looking over my shoulder waiting for the next betrayal. The part where I measured my worth against a man who never really saw me. The part where I carried the weight of his mistakes like they were mine to manage. Later that week at my firm's annual retreat, I was asked to give a short talk on resilience. I didn't mention my father. Not by name. Not even by role. But I spoke about the moment I learned my college fund was gone. Not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. A lesson. Sometimes the people who should support you the most, I told the room, become the obstacles you have to overcome. Their underestimation becomes your motivation. The audience nodded, quiet and thoughtful. When I stepped off stage, one of the partners approached me. You don't just work like someone who's smart, she said. You work like someone who's had to fight for everything. She was right. At home, I pinned the final receipt next to my degree and a photo of my grandmother standing at Heathrow Airport, arms outstretched, beaming at the world. That wall didn't just hold memories. It held proof that even when someone steals your foundation, you can still build your own empire. A few weeks later, my grandmother forwarded me an email. It was from him. He'd moved again. Said he was starting over, again. Attached was a blurry photo of a new apartment and a vague message about missing family. I replied with 2 sentences. I wish you well. Please don't contact me again. That was the last time. Because forgiveness doesn't require reunion. And peace doesn't require permission. Now, when people ask me about my story, I don't tell them about what he took. I tell them about what I built. Career I earned. A home I love. A life that no longer bends to someone else's chaos. My father once believed that stealing from me would keep me dependent. What he didn't realize was that his greatest mistake wasn't taking my money. It was betting against my strength. And he lost.